Hello and welcome to Work But Make It Human. I'm Jim Mayer. I'm your host. Each week, I'm going to bring in a seasoned consultant to solve a workplace problem, something that I've seen or experienced or heard from companies that I've worked with, from shops that I've toured. Sometimes these will be audience submissions. So if you have a scenario that you're going through and you want it solved here on the show, please send it over to me. Sometimes it's going to be a Reddit thread because I do peruse Reddit a lot, and there are some really wild things that happen on Reddit that I think I could solve with a future co-host. This is going to be live. It's going to be unfiltered, and it's going to be grounded in emotional intelligence and leadership tools and all the things that we've talked about on the show already. But the difference is I'm bringing my friends to the table because I don't think that you want to hear just my perspective on what happens in the world of work. There are a lot of different ways to solve problems, and I'm going to bring other voices because that's how true innovation comes around. Today's case, it's a manufacturing floor split by a silent but not so silent war between two shift leads, one that is loud, forceful, and boisterous, to put it nicely. The other one is quiet, respected, or so it seems on the surface. The company called it a personality conflict, but it has become something much bigger and very costly. Before we dive into the case, though, I want to welcome this episode's guest co-host, consultant, whatever you want to call him, Craig Coyle. Craig, welcome to Work But Make It Human. So excited to be having this podcast experiment with you, I guess is the best way to put it, man. You're a good dude, and I wouldn't have thought of a better person, or I couldn't have thought of a better person to do this with. How are you doing today, man?
Dude, I'm so happy to be here. I'm grateful to be here and to join you in this conversation. And such a fun little example to start with, right? Like something that, let's be honest, like all of us in some shape or form, probably in the workspace we're in today, right? Except maybe you and I, because we work for ourselves, but
exactly.
We work with a lot of companies that do this, but in some shape or form, personality conflict, it exists. And if we don't address it or create some form of a program or framework to manage it, man, things can go a little haywire, can't they?
Absolutely, man. And that, I think, is going to be the joy of this show moving forward. Is it is going to be situations that resonate and exist with so many different shops or within so many different shops. It's going to be something that what I hope people get is solutions, right? How would Jim and Craig solve this issue? But I also want people to feel like they're not alone, right? That this stuff does happen constantly all over the place. And that if you're seeing it in your shop, you're not the only one. And there are people who have solved these problems, and hopefully that helps people out. Craig, before we dive into that case, you've been on the other show, Manufacturing Culture Podcast. As of today, that episode has not been released. It'll come out in the next couple of weeks. But for people who want to hear your entire story, I want to encourage people to go listen to that episode. But if they don't have a really cool 40 minutes to listen to that episode, give us a little bit of introduction about yourself, your background, how you got to where you are today with your organization, your company you started.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was such a fun conversation.
It was cool.
Yeah, 40 minutes. Man, I encourage them to go check it out. But yeah, so I founded a company called Operation Lead. We really specialize in frontline supervisor to mid-level manager leader development. And we do that by working both with the supervisors, the managers themselves, but we also, and kind of where I enjoy the work the most, honestly, is working with the senior leaders in manufacturing, operations heavy type businesses and helping them not only see and understand the importance of having a strong cohort of frontline leaders, but understanding how to build that strong cohort of frontline leaders as well. Not just the skills you need, but how do you create an environment where you're facilitating the journey from new leader to professional leader. And that's really what we specialize in. So, and it's so fun to see the impact that this has for organizations on retention, on production, and efficiency, on engagement. You know, all the things that ultimately turn the levers for us are the things it affects. And that's what's really, that's why I do what I do, right? And I know you do some similar works.
Yeah, absolutely. And the why is very important. But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you and I have become friends. So I think I can say this in and be confident in me saying it. I feel like your background, your lived experiences yourself have helped why you have that why for your mission and why you do what you do. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Oh, 100%. I mean, folks, I encourage them to go for the detailed, the long form story. But the short form story is I graduated from West Point. I got to go to flight school. I became an Apache pilot. I accomplished my dream by the time I was 23 years old. And I took
Which is
over.
amazing, man. I'm 46. I haven't even like scratched it, right? I didn't even know that what my dream was until like a year and a half ago, right?
Well, I'm living a new dream now, right? We're all
There you go.
constantly chasing the dream that we're after. But I mean, I accomplished this dream and I'm 23 years old. I'm a platoon leader in the United States Army. I'm in charge of 20 or so people. All of them are older than me. And I'm miserable, like depressed. I don't understand why. And to be quite honest, I was in a toxic environment. And through my own personal failures as a leader and as pilot, I had to figure out and start to understand that even though I had access to arguably the greatest leader development institution in the world, that I hadn't become a leader. I had just been taught how to manage.
Got it.
And as I made that slowly, albeit, but as I made that mindset shift, everything started to change for me. Come full circle, I ended up being the company commander in the Army. I took over an organization that was very toxic, and I was able to, in 12 months, really flip it and see the impact that just good, sound, quality leadership can have on not just have on an organization. Let's take it further than that. Have on people's lives.
Yes.
You know what I
Absolutely,
mean?
man.
And for me, like at that point, when I took over that company, I knew I was going to get out of the military. And it just became my mission every day to give people an example of what right looks like in organizational leadership, right?
I love
Like,
it.
I want these people who are probably going to be in the military for 10, 15 more years to at least be able to look back at their time in the Army and say, that company had it right.
Yes.
And so now we get to have a conversation and hopefully help people across the world do the same.
Yes. I love it, man. I love it. And I mean, I never served myself. My dream growing up, we didn't dive into this in your story because it was all about you, right? My job was just to ask you questions. My dream growing up, I wanted to be a naval aviator, right? So I saw Top Gun. I was like 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that. I saw Top Gun in the theater and like I'm getting goosebumps right now, even thinking about it. It has been for 41 years, 40 years, been my favorite movie. I love that movie. I was born to a couple of hippies, which if you know me now is no surprise. I'm a modern day 2025 version of a hippie, right? But my mom said, if you enlist, I'm going to shoot you in the foot, which isn't the nonviolent response you would expect out of a hippie, but that was her response. And so I never got to be a naval aviator, right? I never got that part of me fulfilled. But I've had a lot of friends who are former military. And the one thing that always strikes me as wild is there is no middle ground. Either they loved the leadership they had while they served, or they absolutely hated it, right? And so I think you being able to be that voice and turn things around was pretty amazing when I heard your story. Shit, man, we could do this all day. Let's dive into the case. What do you say?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right,
We can
cool.
do a round two of
Yeah.
manufacturing culture another time.
So I'm going to read, I wrote this up kind of as a brief, as a narrative. It shouldn't take me more than like 3 or 4 minutes if I read it all the way through. But as I'm reading through this, interrupt me if you need clarification of anything, just so you have understanding of the case as a whole. So a couple of months ago, I got an email from a recently promoted general manager at a small to mid-sized machine shop. The subject line was, "We need help." And the body of the email was just as short. It said something along the lines of, I've got 2 shift leads. They've been battling lots of conflict. There's a total breakdown. We're ready to fire them both. Wanted to reach out to you as a last ditch effort. Unfortunately, this isn't a problem that I haven't heard before, but it was the exhaustion. It was a clarity from his voice, from the tone of the email that grabbed me and showed me that this was really, It was a signal flare more than anything, right? This was him grasping for that last ray of hope. So we talked on the phone. I got some more information from him and his supervisor. Ultimately, there are two shift leads that work opposite shifts. One runs day shifts, one runs night shifts. They only overlap for a couple of hours at most every day, but for the last 18 to 24 months, they've been locked in a festering, quiet war of passivity and aggression and aggressive behavior, I guess. So we're going to call these two subjects night and day. You with me so far?
I'm with you.
All right. So Day is a calm, tactical, somewhat polished person. He's been to some of my leadership trainings themselves, right? And in our conversation, I had an initial conversation with both of these individuals. He spoke about team building, about implementing things that he had learned from the sessions that I'd run, about training initiatives for his team and eliminating bad habits and setting expectations. He said things like, I try to keep the new guys clean from old habits. And it's true that he means it, right? He sees himself as a culture setter, but something definitely leaks out from around the edges with this guy. Some implied accusations, production numbers where he's pointing fingers at the other shift. He has an ear of that newly promoted GM and quote unquote points things out a lot about the other shift lead. He describes those shift discrepancies like there were only 3 parts completed at night shift and we produced 3 times that or 5 times that during the day. He doesn't name names necessarily. He puts data and tries to let that speak for himself, for itself. He's not confrontational. He doesn't necessarily physically document things. He keeps it all in his head, but he does leave notes on machines for night shift, not handoff notes, right? More passive aggressive notes. Comments written where others can see them, not just the other shift lead. And to some, they may look like process observations, but for the other shift lead, they'd land like fucking bombs. And it's not great for the other shift lead. So you got a picture of Day in your head right now?
Yep.
All right. So Night, on the other hand, he is about as polar opposite of Day as possible. He's all reaction. He's direct, he's loud, he's impatient. When I asked him how things were going, he told me this, and this is a quote from our conversation. This dude's been fucking with me since day one, and every time I react, I'm the bad guy. He said it was zero polish, zero filter. He sees Day's behavior not as professionalism. There's no professionalism. It's all weaponized subtlety. It's provocation. He sees Day as a guy who smiles in the office and then leaves a note knowing exactly how it will get a reaction out of Night. Another thing that Night told me is that Day has never said anything to his face. It's always a sticky note or a written 3-ring binder note, handwritten, put on a machine. It's always something backhanded and Night snaps, right? And Night here's where it gets even deeper, right? But wait, there's more. Night has filed. What's that?
That's how you know it's getting good.
Absolutely. We're building here. We're crescendoing. Night has filed more than 30 formal complaints with management. Formal complaints for harassment, for a hostile work environment. And all of those were written to protect himself. In his words, if I don't write it down, they won't believe me. He even said he's got the language and the ear of the GM. I've got the anger. So this is where we start to realize what this is. To me, it's not a personality clash. Again, I'm going to let you kind of draw your own conclusions. To me, it's a full-blown collapse of trust. You've got 2 leaders, 2 completely incompatible operating systems, no interpreter, no conduit between the two. The GM and the super have had 2 meetings to try and quote unquote resolve things.
Yeah.
And one was done by the GM that was promoted. One was done by the GM previous. No facilitator. Neither of them have conflict resolution training. There were no structure. It was just the GMs, the various GMs, and these 2 men in a room with someone hoping for change and peace, right? Both of those meetings ended with handshakes, and quickly, and within like weeks, there was no change.
Unsurprisingly, right?
Yeah, right? Shocking. Meanwhile, all this is happening, right? The floor is now starting to pick sides, right? Morale is down, production is inconsistent. Day crew blames the night crew. Night crew feels baited by the day crew. Everybody's watching. Nobody's intervening. Every shift handoff is a chance to add another layer of absolute resentment. And here's the thing that makes it really tough. The new GM, this promoted GM, he's trying. He's super competent. He is literally one of the greatest programmers I have ever met in my life. But he's 100% out of his league when it comes to the people side of things. He knows the people, but he doesn't know how to manage the psychological warfare that this has become. The owner is a friend of mine, so I'm not going to say too many bad things, right? But he has been without an HR department for an HR leader. He has a department, but without an HR leader for 2.5 years, maybe 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
He will step in to terminate someone, but doesn't necessarily show up for the meetings that could have prevented it.
Yeah.
So we're left with this system in collapse. We've got a passive aggressive leader who communicates with notes and implication. We've got an explosive leader who feels hunted and exposed. We've got a GM trying to hold it together with duct tape and no training or tools, and an owner who treats people management like an optional subscription that he forgot to cancel. Neither day nor night trusts the company either more. This is the worst part about it. Neither believes the GM can or will fix it. The team on the floor has learned that if you speak up, nothing happens. And again, from my standpoint, this is how bad cultures form. Those don't form in a moment. They form over time in silence, in unspoken accusation, in every shift where someone walks in knowing that they're already angry. And in every time leadership says, just move on, or we're just going to make it work, right? And that was literally a quote from one of the other leaders in this shop. Is our mantra is we just make it work. So, I mean, you and you brought this up. We've seen this in thousands of other shops, right? Hundreds of other shops. We know that as we're having this conversation, so many versions of this are happening in shops all over the US, right? So this is where you and I are now going to have a conversation about how we could possibly solve this. But I want to start with one question. But before I ask that, I want to ask you, do you feel like you got a sense of the case?
Yeah. Let's just a couple quick clarifying things. Let's talk about org structure real quick. So size of the company is roughly, what would you say?
83.
So, small to medium size, really doesn't matter what they make, right? But it's a scaled organization. When I speak in leadership terms, when I say scaled organization, typically what I've seen, I'd be curious your thoughts on this. So when you get to around 50 people, probably a little bit less than that, but that's when it really starts to show. I like to call 50 people the tipping point, where you don't have an option of whether or not you're scaling your leadership, right? You have to scale leadership systems, processes in order for things to stay afloat. So there's a little clarity there. So we've got owner and GM. Is GM is he or she the person financially responsible for the company, or is the owner playing more of a president, CEO role and just expecting the GM to kind of be essentially a COO?
Yeah, good question. So previous GM had been promoted into a VP of manufacturing role because 3 years ago, I asked the owner the question, do you want to be president and be here every day, or do you want to be CEO and be the face of the company and go play and do the things that you want to do? And he promoted that GM at the time, the previous GM, into that VP role. That gentleman has since retired. But instead of promoting the current GM into that VP role and having him really lead operationally and lead the people side of the business, he promotes him into a GM role. So you've got a CEO/president/HR/accounting owner and this GM leading the team on the floor.
Gotcha. Okay. So we basically got an owner playing the whole C-suite, and then we've got a GM beneath him kind of running the daily operations,
Yes.
if you will,
Yep.
essentially serving as a COO, basically. And then so beneath this GM, do these supervisors directly report to the GM, or is
Yes.
there an operations manager that they fall under?
Nope. The GM is operations. So there are 4 of that mid-level manager. They call them supervisors, but mid-level manager that report directly into the GM, not to the owner.
Got it. Okay. So, well, I mean, depending what type of environment our listeners are in, they may see almost identical type roles. You may see some supervisors reporting to an operations manager. This could be 2 operations manager that are reporting to a director of operations. But I mean, this could be 2 different engineering managers reporting to the director of engineering, right?
Exactly.
You could see this in any shape or form. So I always think it's important to get some clarity on the org structure. Cool. I think you got a question to kick us off then.
Yeah. What's the first thing, I mean, outside of your clarifying questions, what's the first thing that you want to know when you get this kind of a case in front of you? And what does that first thing that you want to know tell you about where you want to start digging into the meat behind this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is you really, I mean, as a consultant, but just as anything, right? Whether you're the GM or you're the owner in this position, like you really, really have to fight to seek to understand, right? And I think it's very, very easy in these situations to pick and choose the information that you want to hear to make it easier to handle, right? Because like up front, right? It might be super easy to be like, oh, well, this day shift lead supervisor, I mean, he's he's clearly doing everything. The other guy's in the wrong, right? So let's figure out what's wrong with this other guy. But then when you start to really dig here, okay, there's some stuff going on the left. There's some stuff going on the right. There's some stuff going on up above. So it is always, this is true for everything, even situations I'm personally involved in, right? There is always multiple parties at fault, whether you want to believe it or not. But ultimately, when you come into a position like this, you really want to figure out, okay, do they really want to solve this problem?
Yes.
Or do they just want it to look like they want to solve this problem?
100%.
Right? Because at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, but what can't you make it do?
Yeah. You can't make it drink.
Can't make it drink, right? And so to everybody who's listening today, if you find yourself in this type of environment, 1, just know you're not alone, right? Like we've all been there. 2, you have options, right? And so if you know you're not in an environment that's healthy for you, go find a different environment. Don't let a company guilt you into staying in somewhere that's unhealthy for you.
Yes.
Because guess what? If that environment exists and they aren't showing you that there are clear signs that they're trying to figure and resolve it, then it's not going to change.
Yes.
Right? So those would be the if there's any, like, if you're someone who is seeing this play out with leaders that you work for on a daily basis, you deserve better.
Yes.
Right? I'll just be straight up, like you deserve better.
100%.
It's up to you to find it, right? Because if you're allowing yourself to be subjected to this environment, but you deserve better. And I promise you it's out there. And if it's not out there, then I'm charging you with the mission to go create a space like that because we need people.
Absolutely.
Like our industry desperately needs it, right?
Desperately.
I think that's, upfront, clarifying the whole context and everything. That's kind of where I would start. The caveat to all that is now, let's say we're a tag team, Jen, we're going into this situation. I think there's two things, and I'll kind of throw this back at you and kind of get your thoughts on this. And there's 2 things to think about here. 1 is how do you prevent this from manifesting in the first place, right? So like what are some things we can maybe think about or talk about, and maybe this may be a conversation for another time, that would prevent this type of environment, this situation from even happening in the first place. But then the second piece to it is how do you resolve this? How do you come back? You know what I mean? And so I think there's 2 completely different lenses to 1, look at this through. And I guess in this situation, it would be, well, we have to focus on how to resolve it first. And then it's not just about resolving it. It's about creating an environment where this wouldn't be a natural byproduct that's inevitable of happening. You know what I mean?
Yep. And I think to me, I agree 100%. I think we have to look at the resolution first and then walk it back a little bit and say, okay, let's make sure that we put guardrails in place so this doesn't go off the cliff again, right? That we are not going into this situation again. To me, looking at resolution, look at pride, right? I look at when I don't know one person who's a machinist or a welder or a skilled assembly person or a fabric. I don't care what your role is. If you do a job, if you are able to stand back at the end of the day and say, I made this, right? You've got a lot of pride in what you do, right? That nobody shows up and says, you know what? I'm going to make shitty parts today, right? Nobody has that attitude coming to work. So, but at the same time, I've come across a lot of people who have that mindset of, I am the best machinist in the world, or I am the best welder in the world. And this is a case of two shift leads who both have a goal of wanting to make good parts, but they both think that they are the best in the world, right? So to me, we have to start with, what do I want? What do they want? What do we want? And what are common grounds, right? That's where I start with this conversation, is sitting down with both of them. What do you want, right? What is the outcome that you're expecting to get from this? But on the flip side, let's practice some empathy here. What do you think they want? And then what do you guys want together? What are those common grounds that you guys want together? That's where I would approach this from. What about you?
Yeah, I think I kind of teed something up for you. I don't know if you caught on to that. I teed something up from you there to kind of see where you would take it, and you did exactly what I was hoping you would do, because here's kind of the point I was leading to.
Okay.
A lot of times, the things that help us resolve conflicts in our organizations are also in another way the same things that help us prevent them in the first place. And you brought this up a little bit earlier when you were introducing the whole situation. But to me, the first thing that really stood out writ large was there was a vacuum in this organization, right? And we all know what happens when a vacuum gets burst, right? Pressure, air immediately rushes in to fill it, right? I mean, it's like when we don't mow our backyard, right? What happens? Like, weeds start growing. Like, if you want a garden, you have to cultivate it, right? If you want it to look beautiful, you have to go put the time in, and you have to dedicate yourself to it, and you have to nurture it. You have to do all these things, or else, I mean, you would naturally expect it to look pretty ratchet out there.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I mean, that's the same thing that happens in the workplace, right? If we don't intentionally create an environment that encourage isn't the right word here, that necessitates collaboration.
Okay.
Right?
Keep going. I like it.
Right? Because we all are motivated by different things, right? And so if you and I are separate shift leads, and we're motivated by a common purpose to help grow the company XYZ by each playing a certain role that required us to work together, right? If we had a clear definition of what success looked like for each of us, and we knew the only way we could reach that is by helping the other person, what do you think would happen? Now, here's the caveat. Right? If we exist in an organization where there's a vacuum of what success looks like, I'm going to define success for myself. You're going to define success for yourself. Now, if I grew up in a world where I was taught that in order for me to succeed, I have to make sure others don't, what do you think I'm going to do? Even if it's subconscious.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what's going on between these two shift leads is they're both kind of living out a little bit of a victim mindset where they both believe it's either him or me. They exist in a vacuum where there's nothing forcing them to collaborate and to support one another to create mutual success. And so they feel, and this is all going on subconsciously. Like, I don't think either of them are doing this like intentionally. Right?
100%.
Yep. We don't. I mean, this is like when you get into the weeds of psychology. I mean, this is like stuff like you just that's ingrained in you from childhood. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I had to overcome this. Like, it's not easy to overcome. But really, what's going on here? I mean, we got two folks that are literally feel like they have to look over their shoulder in order to succeed, right? And
Yes.
accomplish what they feel like they're on a mission to accomplish in their lives. And what's happened is an environment, because the environment is a vacuum. It's ultimately created a you versus me ecosystem.
Wow.
And so now what's playing out in that ecosystem is some of the negative aspects of each of these personalities is starting to expose itself.
Yes.
And since that vacuum has continued to be left to be filled by this conflict, right? Well, what's inevitably going to happen? I mean, people are going to emulate what their leadership
100%.
shows as an example, right? And so everything's just going to stem from there, and obviously production's going to. But the big thing, and I love how you kind of took this and ran with it immediately, is like we have to figure out as an entire business system here, what are we trying to do?
Yeah.
What does success look like for day? What does success look like for night? Why is it so critical that they both need to be successful together?
Yes.
Right? And from there, now we're starting to actually landscape the yard, if you
Yep.
will. To
I
stick
love
with
it.
that acknowledgement. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I love it. And one part that can't believe I didn't put in there, and I think this ties into what you're talking about. There are no defined values for this organization. So there's no poster with even the most vague words on the wall saying these are our values. There's nowhere on the website saying these are our values. When I asked leaders, and that's where the just make it work, that was their response by the leadership team, those middle managers, on what the value is there. We just make it work. So I think you nailed it, man, because I think that because of that leadership vacuum, and we see this a lot in other organizations, whether it's a leadership vacuum or somebody getting into a job without leadership skill set, they revert to some of that more toxic behavior, right? Some of that ingrained baggage that we carry with us from earlier in our lives and from other jobs. I mean, we carry that.
Let's explore that a little bit, because I think we've all been there, right? But why do you think that happens?
I'm sure I could call David Bovis, who is a much smarter like neuroscientist than I am, but it's a trauma response. If I know what this looks like, right? It's a trauma response to bring that baggage with us from job to job, the same way we bring baggage with us from relationship to relationship. It's a trauma response, and it's a defense mechanism that we have put up to prevent that from happening in the future. Am I even close to being right on that?
No, I think 100%. Here's how I always like to explain it. Like, leadership is hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, let's simplify it. Being a supervisor, being a shift lead, being a mid-level manager, like, it is not easy, right? Like, you're entering into arguably an entirely new profession that you probably don't have any training in, with a whole new set of expectations, and you're being charged with being the person singularly responsible for the success or failure of a group of people that you quite honestly have no proven skills how to lead them, right? And with all this going on, you now have a set of people breathing down your neck for solutions, for answers, right? Let's be honest, right? Like, managers need to have answers, right? At
Yep.
the end of the day, have results, answers, all these kinds of things. Now, you put all of that on someone's plate, right? And you expect them to rise to a certain level of capability, of relational management, of self-management, all these EQ type terms, without any training or awareness or development, right? What's about
Yes.
to happen, right?
Yep.
We get stressed out and we start having stress reductions, right? But the same thing that happens in relationships, right? We get stressed out and we react by yelling, or we react by avoiding. And then once you avoid once, what are you more likely to do the next day? And so it starts to snowball some of these negative. It's just a stress response that ultimately comes out of this void we have in frontline leader, supervisor, mid-level manager development. Now, we can talk about that for days, but I really wanted to dig into that because there's a lot of that going on in this situation as well. But I think the number one thing that I think stands out to me writ large in this kind of case is this vacuum. And
Yeah.
we say leadership vacuum, that can mean a lot of different things. Really, in this specific case, we're talking about a messaging vacuum.
Yeah. Agreed.
There's nothing unifying this organization,
Yep.
driving them to a certain goal that's forcing the different departments to understand the role each plays in helping everybody collectively reach that goal and why that's so important. And we could continue to dive into what that could look like. I don't think we have time for that today, but that's the glaring thing that's going on here. And because that vacuum exists, we intentionally or unintentionally start filling that vacuum by ourselves. Now, you've got two shift leads that filled that vacuum in distinct, separate ways that conflict with one another. You add some of the stress reaction of management on top of it because guess what? They're probably not hitting their goals because there's this huge vacuum, right?
Right.
All these things start to snowball, and you've got two type A personalities because most leaders are type A personalities, whether they're introverted or not, right?
Yep.
Starting to butt heads.
So how would you, Craig, approach that vacuum, that messaging vacuum from leadership? What is that first step? So if somebody is listening right now and they're like, fuck, this sounds a whole awful lot like what I got going on. How do we fill that? How do we stop that? How do we patch that and then make it more than a patch and make it a sustainable solution for the future?
Yeah, I think up front, you just I use the mission statement formula that I learned in the military. And I think we talked about it maybe a little bit on the manufacturing culture podcast. But the big thing I like to say there is like a mission statement is something that you set your team to accomplish to win. There's success and failure, right? It's not this fancy like branding statement we paint on the wall that I got used to be. Right. No, it's like we will accomplish X, Y, and Z by the end of this year or by the end of next year by doing these three things. And this is why it's so important. And if you forget the last part there, the why, right, that's your opportunity to provide purpose, right? So you're giving a specific success and failure criteria, you're giving a timeline, and you're giving a reason. And then when you share that with everybody, right, if I was the GM, if I shared that with each of my shift leads, right, they would each have a component of that mission so that they can create their own mission, right? Unique thing in the military is we always have a main effort and we have supporting efforts.
Okay.
Right? So if we were an infantry organization, right, and we had to attack an objective, right, your main effort might be the organization, the company that's going to clear that objective. And you probably also have another company to the left of that company doing some support by fire, right?
Got it.
You might have another company to the right of that company, maybe doing another support by fire. You probably have some artillery in the background doing some indirect fire to support that company. And then you probably got arguably the best part of the operation, some Apaches overhead. You know what I'm saying? Doing some support from but see, now just think about how will we translate that to a manufacturing environment, right? You got a shift A that's got the majority of your support, a shift B, a shift C. You probably got some quality support. You probably got some logistical. You probably got some warehouse. You probably got some shipping. So you got a main effort, right? It's probably the main shift where you're allocating a majority of your resources. But the main effort can't exist without the supporting effort.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So like day shift, he may be the one churning out the best numbers, but he can't hit the company's goal alone.
Right.
He can't do it without the help of the night shift.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
But then the day shift and the night shift together can't do it without the support of quality. Because if you don't have a quality department, nothing's getting out the door. Quality can't exist on their own because if all you have is quality department, you have nobody creating the product. You know what I mean? And then if you don't have a shipping department, well, nothing's ever going to get out the door.
You don't get material in, you don't get parts out the door.
Right? And so now you can kind of see, like, if we're this organization and we have a goal, legitimate, revenue-centered, business, for-profit goal that matters because we have lives to feed, and we want to stay in business because we believe we're the best place for all these people to work because we can create a great life for them. and we understand the different missions that each of our departments or shifts play, how they work together, why they're so important, each of them. Now, all of a sudden, the shift leads, you're going to start to understand we better work with each other. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And if
Yes.
they don't, then you know immediately as the supervisor, this guy's got to go. Right? Now, the caveat to that in this situation is we have a little bit of a situation where you may have some individuals that see leadership just as what they can do within their team. But leadership in this context, you can now really start to see is leadership's not just about how you lead your team. It's about how you dance with the other teams around you.
Absolutely.
And that when you start to use this type of quote unquote operating system in an organization, right, where everybody is playing this choreographed dance together to create a common goal and you message it so everybody can see it.
Yes.
Now we're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together, right? Now the gears are starting to mesh and we start rolling.
Yep. And see, before I continue down my thought process, are you done with your thought? Because I'm about to go on a quick rant here.
Go for it.
So you've heard me before. We've known each other for, I don't know, 9 months, maybe a year at this point. But you've heard me before. I've talked about my take on culture being that alignment of values, right? And when you have that alignment of values, you have the start to a good culture. What I've learned from this and a couple other cases that I've had recently is just simply that alignment of values isn't enough because it's the behaviors. And this plays on to what you were just talking about. It's the behaviors that come after that alignment of values that really dictate if the values that you've put on the wall are performative or if there's something you truly believe. And if they are something you truly believe, then that will help connect the dots between the departments, between that why, between that mission statement, so that people are marching in the same direction. But if you have those values and what you say is your value aligns with what these supervisors and what the frontline teams say, sure, you've got good performative BS at that point, right? But you've got to live those values 100% and behave in a way that you show those values rather than just having that alignment of values. Does that make sense? And does that fall into what you were just saying?
100%. And I always, I take it a step further because here's why, right? You can have a great leader at the top of an organization, right? Like a great person, like someone that is just genuine, kind, like truly and lives with integrity, like has the values that you want to see in a person, lives them out, right? But if there's a messaging vacuum, right?
Yes.
You end up with the exact same situation, right? And so that's where it's so important to understand that if you're entering into leadership or if you've been in leadership for a while and you're still struggling to feel like you really grasp it, like leadership isn't just about, it's not just being a good person. It's not just having strong values. It's not just being a person of your word. Leadership in its essence is influence, right? It's guiding an organization, doesn't matter how big, guiding an organization from we'll call it A to B. You're taking people to a destination. Now, it is imperative in order to be able to do that to be a values-based integrity-driven person, right? But that's not all that matters, right? You can be a great person, right? Sit in the cockpit of an airplane with a bunch of people on the back, but if you don't know how to take off. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot going on here, but at the end of the day, if you're going to get to the destination, you got to fly people. You know what I mean? You can't just do it on being a good person.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So once we approach that leadership vacuum and we develop that shared set of behaviors and we create that passion, right? That purpose for people. What's the next step, right? How do we rebound from this, right? Because that's creating the pack, I guess, right? That's the fix a flat if we're using a really simplistic analogy here. What's beyond that? How do we fix a tire sustainably and make sure that this doesn't happen again? Is this something, in your opinion, we look at on a regular basis? Because you brought up the mission, right? And I don't know a lot of organizations that reevaluate their mission on an annual basis, but you said this year or next year when you were talking about that. Is that something in your experience needs to be looked at more frequently?
I mean, you can reevaluate the mission every single day, right? When I was on deployment, I pretty much had to do that, right?
Sure.
Every brief that I had could have been a new mission. I think so. It peel that back a little bit, 100%, right? Like we maybe let's put it through the lens of what we were talking about earlier. We maybe through finding some common ground and determining the trajectory of where we collectively wanted to go, maybe we resolved the conflict, right? We created a handshake, which, oh, by the way, because we already know one of the individuals is conflict avoiding, that's going to be pretty easy, right?
Right. Yeah.
But clearly it's unresolved and things keep bubbling up, right? And this is the biggest mistake that I see across the board in organizations is whether we're on the preventative side or we're on the resolution side of this equation, this leadership messaging, this guidance equation is just because you communicated something once does not mean people remember,
100%.
right? Like if you want to fully adopt this model, if you will, that I kind of briefly explained here, you literally, I mean, I'm talking every day as the leader, you are beating this into people's minds. Like, this is our mission. This is how we're accomplishing it. What are you doing today? What are you? It's almost this idea of like the daily huddle or the weekly huddle. And you started like everything you do revolves around this mission, right?
Mhm.
Everything you do is filtered through the lens of this mission, right? And because you're doing that, I guess you're also creating an environment where you have to have all of your leads together to discuss this mission quite frequently. And so if you continue to do that, right, continue to put this collaborative effort in front of these people and remind them that they have to work together, and remind them that success for both of them means they're working together, then but here's the thing, like it's everything in leadership, everything in working with people, it's all learned habits, right?
Yep.
So the environment that is existing that we're studying right now is ultimately a learned habit that's been learned after probably years, right?
Yep.
So the thing that is going to be resolved overnight is silly, right? And so we just got to chip away at it. 1 second, 1 moment, 1 day, 1 meeting, 1 handshake, right, at a time. Continue to slowly work. I mean, I kind of used the example of the company I took over. It was 90% toxic. It did not change. I promise you. Trust me. My gray hairs are proof that it did not change overnight, right? But 12 months down the road, we had to take another one of these climate surveys, and it was night and day difference, right? And it's like small habits, right? Small things. If you do them consistent, you're not even going to notice the changes happening until something smacks you in the face and says, "Hey, remember what it was like 365 days ago?" And so that would be my biggest encouragement in this situation is if you're first you have to be truly committed to the individuals you have in places that you have.
Yep.
Right. If there is a morality or an ethical issue going on here, or you just feel like it's gotten too far and things have to be wiped clean, like you as the leader have to be able to make that decision. But if you're truly committed to the people that you have in the seats, you also have to be truly committed to the process that's going to overcome these learned habits.
Yeah.
Establish new habits in the organization and really chart a way forward.
So I've got a quick rant and then a question for you. A quick rant is I hate that we, from a very young age, are told that we need to compromise, right? Because compromise has never actually solved a problem. Compromising is a lose-lose or a win-lose solution to conflict, right? You used the word a couple of times in collaborate.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more intention, Craig. It takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more effort to collaborate, to solve conflict. But ultimately, what you can walk away with when you collaborate is a win-win situation where people get as close to 100% of what they're looking for on both sides as possible.
Yeah.
So
And sometimes more than that.
yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Welcome to leadership, right? Hey, the hard stuff, right? That actually makes a difference, that no one's ever going to force you to do. Guess what? It takes twice the amount of time. You have to be super intentional with it. People are going to think you're crazy at first, and no one's going to want to listen to you until you do it for probably at least 2 months straight. But guess what happens on month 3? You start to realize these little things, right? You notice that one person do that one thing without you having to ask them about it.
Exactly.
Right. And then month 4, this other person starts doing something similar. Right. And then next thing you know, like month 7, 8 rolls around, you've got a whole different business running itself. You know what I mean?
So I love that. I love that take. My question for you is, you're talking about small incremental change, which we're good at in manufacturing, right? That's something that when it comes to processes, technology processes, manufacturing processes, we're really good at finding those small incremental changes that we can make to become better. When it comes to people processes, we are shit. We are really, really bad at it in this industry, right? That's not our strong suit. If I'm hearing you correctly, small incremental change that we could make here is we could have that small amount of time that we have a shift overlap. We could have a daily huddle or a weekly huddle. Because how many times have we heard, again, this conflict isn't new. If you spend any time on the manufacturing subreddit on Reddit, you see shift issues. My day shift is shit. My night shift is shit, right? Or my night shift is shit. You see this. This is constant. This is not a new phenomenon.
Us versus them.
What's that?
Us versus them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So if we just had that, that's my biggest takeaway from this conversation, right? Is if we just, in that small window of time, it could be an hour, take 15 minutes of it and have a huddle and just talk about the values, talk about the behaviors, talk about the results, talk about the outcomes we're looking to achieve and how we can do it together and make it a truly a collaborative environment where people are sharing ideas. Hey, instead of dialing back on this part that I proved out today because you don't necessarily trust me because I'm day shift and you're night shift, let me tell you right now, you can run this at full hog and you can get this part done in a third of the time that I was doing it today, right? I mean, is there validity in that? I mean, did we just come up with a really cool small incremental change that companies that have 2 shifts can do to solve that communication issue, that us versus them mentality between night and day?
100%. I mean, I think this should be happening at every intersection of leadership in an organization as frequently as possible. Because if it's not, then you're not clarifying as the leader, you're not clarifying and directing people in the right path, right? You're not helping choreograph the dance that all your subordinates are doing.
Fuck yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so something we used to do all the time downrange in Iraq is every shift, you had a shift change brief. It was short, but everybody that needed to be there was there. And then I would always, as the leader, would have to come in a little bit earlier because I had to do the same thing with my boss and my peers. And then I would facilitate it with my organization and make sure they did it with their, right? And it would just flow all the way down. So really what we're doing is we're creating this streamlined funnel of communication to validate everything that needs to happen on a daily basis. Make sure things are progressing in the right direction, streamlining the process at which things need to happen so that we don't fall backwards every time someone has to go home. We keep the momentum, we keep moving forward. And it's really like meetings get this awful, awful, awful connotation in the corporate, especially in manufacturing, because people think like, no, that's the office people's job to do meetings. No, that's a communication tool, guys.
Right.
The meeting doesn't have to be long. It can be 10 minutes, right? As long as we understand how to execute the meeting, what the meeting's for, and we keep it short and sweet so that we accomplish the objective. Yeah, we need to be doing this as frequently as possible to make sure that we're streamlining process, the flow of information, and execute what we know we need to execute to win on a daily basis. Period.
I think we could have an entire other conversation on this show, Craig, about how to run an effective meeting, because I've stood in shops, and I mean, I know there's a coffee mug out there and I can't rip them off, but this meeting could have been an email, right? And I know not everybody in a shop gets that in email, so it doesn't always work. But how many of those meetings could have been an email? Run an effective meeting. inspire people, right? Invite collaboration, invite people to the table. So maybe that's the next episode you and I approach. And so if anybody's out there listening still to this and you have a case study about shitty meetings, send it over to us. Or if you want to be on the show and talk to us about meetings, join us. I don't care. We'll figure this out. We're kind of making this up as we go, and this is a lot of fun. So Craig, we're at an hour and 3 minutes here. I think that we came up with a really great small incremental change that people can employ today, right? As soon as they're done listening to this episode, I think that we've given the audience today a tool to become better leaders, more human-centric leaders, without just saying that person's not for me. To your point earlier, sometimes the people aren't for the organization and there's a clear lack of alignment, and sure, those people need to go. But instead of just cutting people loose, this is a great way to bridge this. And one thing I want to expand on is that last thing you said about the front office, right? These meetings should happen in that us versus them dynamic between the front and back of the house, right? We see that all the time. They're front of the house. They don't understand what it's like to be back here in the shop, or they're in the shop all day. They're making stuff. They don't know what it's like to sit at a desk. There's definitely an us versus them mentality on that side too. And I think that these kinds of meetings can help with that dynamic as well.
100%. 100%. And there's one thing I always love sharing this whenever I hear about like an us versus them mindset. If you want to be different, say you're one of these supervisors, right? Say you're the night shift supervisor in this example. If you want to be different, create an environment in your team where your team's like inner resentful mission, right, is aggressively and audaciously servant-minded. Now, what do I mean by that? Like I literally mean kill them with kindness, right?
Yes.
Like make it your team's mission every night to do whatever they can possibly do to make day shifts lives easier.
Man, can you imagine the change in our shops if that was
right?
Yeah.
It takes one leader to choose to do things differently and then mobilize a team around that mission. And then all of a sudden everybody's doing it. You know what I mean? And so if you really now, because a lot of people listening to this may be in an environment where they can't create this whole system from the top down, right?
Sure.
But you can do that, right?
Yes.
You can show up and say, you know what, we're going to be the team in this company that does things different. And every day we show up, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to do our best to make everybody else's lives easier. And then try to quantify it, right?
Love it.
We're going to have zero quality issues, or we're going to make sure everything is cleaned up perfectly and have the best handover. And we're even going to stay to make sure every machine, every technician, every operator gets a handover so they can pick up right where we left off every morning.
Yep.
Not because anybody's asking us to.
Yep.
But because we're choosing to.
I love it. I love it.
It's a positive resistance, right?
Positive resistance. I don't know whether I'm going to call this episode us versus them or positive resistance now. I was sold on us versus them until you said that. So I don't know. I love it though. Craig, thank you very much for doing that with this experiment with me, man. I don't know where this is going to go from here, but I had a lot of fun with you on this. I hope you join me again. I know you're going to join me again. I don't even need to hope about it. But thank you very much for doing this with me. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Everybody listening, if you're still listening, because not many people make it through all of my episodes, but if you're still listening, I appreciate you being here. Again, reach out to us if you have problems, cases, issues that keep surfacing in your shop. I'll bring Craig back on to solve it with me. He's a really smart dude. He brought a level of clarity to this conversation that I didn't. And so I really appreciate his joining me. I really appreciate you for listening and supporting me in this journey, whatever this journey is, because I'm having a lot of fun doing it. I'm making content for people and it seems to be resonating. So until next time, this has been Work But Make It Human. I'm Jim Mayer, Craig Coyle. Thank you for joining us.